Good morning, everyone. Turn to day 4, please, in their notes. Please make sure you have your notes packet in front of you because this will be part of what you're required to have to help you with your assignment today. All right, remember we are working on taking some detailed notes here, so make sure that you get all definitions. Feel free to pause the video if I'm ever going too fast or if you didn't get something, okay? All right, so first off, we're going to start with some definitions. So these are at the top of day 4. Some vocabulary. So factored form looks like this. Fix that. So it's x minus r1, which we call our root, and x minus r2. All right. A more concrete example is what you've been doing. It'd be like x minus 2 and x plus 4. So it's just the double parentheses. Zeros are the point where it crosses the x-axis. Points where it crosses the x-axis. All right, and the zero product property just says the only way I can multiply to get 0 is if A equals 0 or B equals 0. In other words, 0 times anything is going to be 0. Okay? All right, so first we're going to start looking at the graphs. We know that the vertex is the higher low point. The new point we're looking at now is where it crosses the x-axis. So these are our zeros. And the point that we are already familiar with is the low point, which is the vertex. Okay? All right, so our zeros are right here at -1 and 3. Our vertex is right here at over 1, down 4. So that's going to be 1, -4. And remember, the axis of symmetry is that line that goes through the vertex. So that's also going to be at 1. These two, again, should always match. The domain we already learned is all reals. The range always starts with y and then gets bigger from our y coordinate here, which is -4. All right. And then lastly, we use our roots to find our factored form. So if we look at this here, take this, our zeros are at -1 and 3. So to write our factored form, that's what we're going to utilize. So it's going to look like we wrote in the notes, y equals double parenthesis, right? And if it's a negative, remember whenever I put something in the parentheses, I'm going to change it to a positive. So it's x plus 1 and x minus 3 because it was originally a positive 3. Right? And lastly, vertex form is the parentheses squared. That's our right, left, up, down. So if it goes right 1, we're going to write a -1 inside. And if it goes down 4, we're going to write a -4. Right? So let's try this one now. All right, our zeros are, remember, where it crosses the x-axis, so that's this point here, so that's -3 and 4. Our axis of symmetry is right in the middle here. Right, and this one's a little tricky. The axis of symmetry is actually 0.5 or 1/2, and our vertex then is 0.5 comma -12 here. So our vertex is right down here. That's our vertex. These are our zeros. Okay, the domain is always all real numbers. The range is y, and since it's pointing up, it's greater than, and remember, it's always the same as our y coordinate here, which is -12. Factored form is the double parenthesis, and we're using our zeros to get factored form. So I really want you to point out right here that we're using the zeros to get factored form, right? We're using the vertex to get vertex form. All right, so factored form, we're using the -3, so it turns to a +3. And we're using the +4, so it turns to a -4. Vertex form is the parentheses squared, right? The vertex is right 0.5, so it's -0.5 and down 12. Right, go ahead and pause the video and try this one on your own. Right, the zeros are at -4 and -1. The axis of symmetry is right in the middle then, right here, at -2.5. So it's right in the middle. If you said -2 or -3, that's not too terrible. And the highest it gets is 2. So it's negative back 2.5 and up 2. Again, the domain is all reals. Now the range is a little different. Since it's pointing down, I need a less than here. And again, it's always less than my y coordinate, which is 2. Lastly, factored form, we're using the -4 and the -1. So it's a +4 and a +1 because we always change the signs. And vertex form is the parentheses squared. I went left 2.5, so I'm going to write plus 2.5. And I went up 2, so I'm going to write plus 2. Right? So feel free to rewind if you need to get any of those back. Otherwise, we'll move on to our last thing, which is the zeros. So just like going from a graph, we have to switch the signs. When we go to an equation, we have to switch the signs. So my first 0 is +2 because that's negative. My second 0 is -4, 0 because that one is positive, so I have to switch the sign to be negative. This one only has 1 because they're both the same number. Since they're +5, the 0 would become -5. And then this one, the -1 becomes +1. This one is a little tricky though, so I'm going to actually have to do some solving here. Because my goal is to cancel this number, so 2 minus 2 is 0, -4 plus 4 is 0, -5 plus 5 is 0, 1 minus 1 is 0, but I can't just look at this and find out what's going to make that 0. So I'm going to set it equal to 0. And then I'm going to solve like I normally do. So -1, so I get 2x equals -1, divide by 2. I get x equals -1/2. So my second 0 is -1/2 0. Now another example, a fast way to do that is if I take that 2x plus 1, I change the sign, which is -1, and then I divide by the number in front. So if I had 3x minus 2, I would change the sign so it becomes +2, and then I would divide by the number in front, which is 3, so my 0 would be 2/3. So really a fast way is to change the sign and then divide by the number that's in front. All right, and for today we're going to skip the axis of symmetry, so please make sure you do your assignment, which is to complete the practice Quizlet that is posted below this video. And then if you finish, you can work on your worksheet number 3 and worksheet 4.